This is the drive up to Sitjaopho gym, which is in Hua Hin. There's a gulf in Thailand that's got like Bangkok up here and Pattaya down here, and Hua Hin is on the other side of that. It's a very relaxed kind of like beach town community kind of thing. And the Sitjaopho gym has been there for a long time. It's owned by twins, Phettho and Phettho, Sitjaopho. And Phettho is now in Sweden, I believe, but Phettho is still at the gym all the time. And it is a much, much loved gym. The fans of Crew F is the name of Phettho, the way that people know him. People just absolutely love the way he teaches. They love his style, they love his personality, such that anytime I go to Hua Hin, which I sometimes do for fights, people are always like, are you gonna train with the Sitjaopho gym? So this time, yes, this time we got to train with Phettho at Sitjaopho. This will be Crew F. And we had to take kind of a weird way to the gym. We had just weighed in for my fight and then had to go straight from the weigh-in to this training session to film. And a road that was on our map to get us there wasn't there anymore. So we ended up like going over this mountain a little bit. It's not as far from like the center of Hua Hin as it seemed in the way that we went, but you have this beautiful mountainy region that we're driving through now in order to get to the gym, and the gym is on this quiet little road. If you're looking for a place to train that's just like kind of a relaxed, oasis-y type of thing, you have to get on your motorbike and come through scenery like this to go anywhere. Definitely a good gym for you. It had a very like kind of intimate, sweet, but not like cliquey kind of feel to it. And again, the scenery is really beautiful. This is a really nice place to be running or riding your motorbike to get anywhere and that kind of thing. We like to show the drive up to these different gyms so that people kind of get a feeling for where they're situated. When we were turning off the main highway in order to go on the road we thought was going to be there and then it wasn't, when we turned off, Carhat's in the car with us, and Carhat was like, we go to that mountain, but he hadn't been there in like, I don't know, 5-8 years, something like that, so he wasn't fully sure where it was. I think it ended up being where he thought it was, but we had to do this kind of like roundabout way to get there. This is probably like, I don't know, 11:30 in the morning. Wasn't super hot. There's some nice wind down in Hua Hin to like cool things down. There's Carhat sitting shotgun. That's me driving. And there's dogs at the gym that I always really like. You can always like, if you give like Michelin stars or 5 stars to a restaurant or something, to me, you give stars of dogs. Like how many dogs does the gym have? And that's how you rate it. So this was our little turn in that Carhat had to be like, oh, there, because we missed the sign. But you can see on the right here is basically just like a property and then some kind of like field area. And over here on the left, this blue up on the top, that's the gym there. Crew F lives there with his wife and he has a son. And we're trying to figure out where to park. Carhat was like, just park right here. And I was like, this road is so tiny. But up here to the right a little bit, we ended up parking in this little lot. And we could have done it just like right across the street. So there's options when you're there. All right, so this is Crew F. He has a very sweet personality. He's very like giggly and excitable and things like this, but he has a very clear vision of technique. He focuses on technique in a really nice way, but he also in his brain has this understanding that people have different ways of doing things and it's based on what something feels like to you. So his corrections are, does that work for you or not, rather than like that looks or doesn't look like what he would do. So he's explaining to me here that for shadow boxing, it's a very good opportunity to repeat your technique. So basically, you like kind of work out kind of like tensions or speed problems or something like this. So like if you feel like your elbow's coming out really bad on your cross, it's shadow boxing where you kind of like calibrate and bring that stuff together. His shadow boxing is really beautiful. You'll see it in a second when he starts to demonstrate things. Here we go. So he didn't like how like stabby my teep was. It was too jerky. He likes it to just kind of come out really long. This is also how Karahat teeps. It's a long kind of like you just lift and it comes out. He was saying that if you stab too hard, you lose balance and then you have to take too many steps to reorganize yourself before you can do anything else. So in shadowboxing, you're calibrating also your balance and how quickly you come off of things. His chin tuck is beautiful. He basically, the way Kevin describes it, is he creates a cobra hood. When he tucks his chin, it just becomes this whole hood. And he's very protected, and then his shoulders are coming to protect his jaw as he's striking. But look at his overall root, like the shape of him. You can see how he's very agile, but he's also protected just in his general shape. Ding, ding. He makes good sound effects too. I really like them. See how he kind of like shifted his body to like feel that knee as I was doing it too? He's seeing what I do and feeling what I'm feeling while I'm doing it so that he can see like what is or isn't kind of within the overall framework of what I like to do. So he's making this point about blocking a kick. He's like, don't just block like you're not thinking about it. The block just comes up because you're supposed to. He's talking about how you don't know whether your opponent's going to kick low or kick high. And so if you just kind of like bring it up like whatever, that's my block, they may end up kicking high and you end up getting knocked off balance. So basically make your automatic block a really nice all one line. Look at how when he blocks, he is completely a wall all the way down. So it doesn't matter where his opponent is kicking, he has the same kind of protection and firmness all the way up and down. And he says you practice that so that it doesn't matter where your opponent is kicking, you're fully protected all the way, rather than like, oh, if you kick low, I block low, if you kick high, I block high, because you don't know. He tucks his leg really close to his body on his blocks. It's part of what makes him so beautiful, but it's also really secure. I'm asking whether he goes up on his toe or whether he's full foot on a block. And he says it depends on what your opponent is doing. You can do both. But again, this is a point about fighters who have a lot of experience, teachers who really understand the kind of nuance of everything. A lot of times their answer for how you should do something is based on feeling. And what they mean is if you're secure in it, if it feels good to you, that's the way you should do it, as long as it's not like completely wrong. He's asking me, should I speak Thai or English? And I'm like, I speak Thai and English, so it doesn't matter. But I was like, I'll speak over the video. So if you're speaking Thai, I'll explain over your Thai. So it doesn't matter. But I kind of like, he speaks English very well. I love the way he actually switches between Thai and English, the way his brain is just like explaining something and then the word is better between Thai or English. And so he'll just switch like mid-sentence. I really like it. See how he's feeling the like rhythm of those knees? You should feel that. When you're shadowboxing, you should feel that. He's saying that he wasn't entirely sure what to teach me, not because he doesn't have vast experience in teaching people, but he was a little bit nervous because this is actually the same day as my fight. So I filmed this session and then I fought that night, and he was really concerned that I was going to be like tired or something. So he has a little bit of nervousness in what to show me or what to teach me because he didn't want me to get tired. But you can see when he actually gets into anything, what he's showing, he's a really skilled teacher. His understanding of like how to kind of shave off the excess of tension, or if someone's slow or if they're going too fast. In my case, he was like, you don't need to be so tense and fast in shadowboxing. Like some moves are fast, some are slower. Look how pretty. His lean back. His techniques are not unique in almost any way, but his readability, like his legibility, his root is like so clear all the time in what he's doing. That's what makes a really beautiful fighter. It's not like he has some special skill that no one else does. He does the technique and the skill really visibly, like he has sharp lines. He's asking me if I have any questions because he like doesn't know where to guide me. I think he was concerned about what I wanted out of the session rather than I just wanted him to show me his style, which he gets into, but he's so nervous it like takes a little bit. So just be patient with him getting more comfortable teaching it. He has so much knowledge. It's like he can answer anything. He just didn't know which direction to go in first. So I was telling him I have a problem where I rush a little bit, ripron, when I'm shadow boxing. So he's showing how to actually change pace a little bit. So I'm like, a lot of people when they're shadow boxing, they just completely forget to block. So how do you shadow blocks? Like how do you feel them in the context of shadowing? So he's using a block to lead into the strike, so that's his counter. You'll see later when we start sparring, this is actually his style. He likes to block and then counter right away. So he like snuffs the opponent's jangwat nung. He lets the opponent go first, and he'll block it, and then he'll counter right away. So he's doing that in his shadow. He's saying it's important to spar a lot. If you have a teacher who tells you it's important to spar a lot, you have a good teacher. Because they understand that a lot of your confidence and a lot of your feeling of how to move between things, offense and defense, comes from actual contact. He said that a lot of Westerners don't actually understand how to work with all of their weapons all together. They rely way too much on punching, and so they don't know how to set up with other things. So what he'll do is actually have his students spar wearing no gloves, and it forces them to rely on other weapons as their setup and as their power and things like this. That's a cool idea. So he's saying chai jangwa. So when you're on the bag, you're still using rhythm and timing. You want to see the flow of the bag, and you want to understand what your next strike is based on the movement of the bag and the timing that's coming from the bag. He's like, this is okay, but, and then watch him just show exactly how the like change of pace. What he's choosing to do is very mappable onto sparring or fighting. See how everything he's doing is left side as an intro, and then maybe he'll fire a power shot when the timing is right for that. This is what bag work will look like if you're actually picturing an opponent in front of you. If you're right-handed and you're fighting a right-handed person, you're going to be front side like 90% of the time.
One technique like a kick, like a knee, like a punch, have to be power and speed at the same time.
So he's saying that when you're working on the bag, something that's important is that you have to have speed and power on every single technique. If you're Muay, if you're just like hitting everything and trying to get as many strikes as you can all at once and you're just kind of like paddling on the bag, this is not what bag work is for. It's learning to get speed and power on every single strike, but not muddling them all together. So he's like, relax and focus on one shot. That's an important thing in how to use bag work, because basically everything you do between strikes is what you would be doing in a ring. Nobody does this when they're like hitting someone in the ring because you have another person with other intentions. So learning on the bag how to like have rhythm and timing and figuring out where your opening is a really good way to use bag work. So I'm like, if you have a student who has power but they're slow, how do you fix that? So he's saying if their power is already good, you have to bring speed into that by having them do repeats. You learn speed by repeating something a bunch of times. So in Thai they call it burn. It's like if you do 50 kicks or something, that's how you gain speed. So he's saying if you're slow, you have to kick often. So I'm like, can you do this on the bag because nobody's holding it? And he's like, it's better to do it on pads. He's like, you can do it on the bag, but it's better to do it in pad work because there's a flexibility to a man holding pads and kind of moving. It's more true to how you would end up following someone and trying to land that kick. So I'm like, how do you kick beautifully? Like, how do you practice learning how to have a beautiful kick so it's not too wide or it's not like a go-go kick straight up?
come between eyebrow, keep the chin down. Okay.
So he said he has all these little points of calibration. The chin down is really good for balance, and then what you're doing with your arms for him is an important element of balance. So this is an important point about, I asked him, how do you have a beautiful kick? Not one part of his answer had to do with his legs at all, which is something you have to understand about like roop and speed and things like this, is that if you want to have a nice punch, it has almost nothing to do with your fist. It has to do with your torso twisting and your balance and things like this. For him, the chin down is a balancing element. I'm asking him about a lead kick because he was doing so many things front side. Some people do a switch for their lead leg, and some people don't. Some people just walk, or some people just throw it. He says switch the leg, which is also what Karahat says. Karahat is all about switching that front leg so that it's faster and it has power. Crew F is saying that if you just walk forward, it's actually quite slow. But you can't do a switch step in space like that because you have to cover a little bit of distance. So there's actually two things that you can do wrong while trying to do the switch step. Not like that. Someone will see it and they'll just teep you. And if you're too slow and you're walking forward with the kick, they'll see you. People who switch tell you that walking forward is too visible. People who walk forward tell you the switch is too visible. Nobody's wrong. But for them, the way that they read what their opponent is doing, they've chosen one or the other based on how their eyes see things. So he's saying, in order to hide the visibility of a switch step, you have to close their eyes first. So he's going to throw like a jab first, and then he'll come in.
Maybe opponent can see and then very slow, you know, and like not safe.
He's saying if you're too slow and the opponent sees what you're doing, it's not safe for you. So basically speed and like kind of putting something in someone's face first is a defense. It's part of the defense of the move. All right, so we're going to do some pad work. One of the things that you should pay attention to in many of the sessions in the Muay Thai Library that have pad work is you can kind of see what the crew is trying to pull from someone. So he's concerned about how hard I'm kicking, whether I'm like hurting myself before my fight tonight. He's very concerned about this. That's why he's stopping. But you can see how he's holding and the patterns that he kind of pulls together are how you manipulate someone's distance, like whether they understand how to close distance or not. He's making a correction here on doing like a little switch step for the knee. So yeah, this is all pretty much at one distance. This is like a knee elbow distance, and then he'll back up too much and you have to use the longer weapons. This is a really good way to kind of like, without speaking so much, shape someone's distance. The correction he made there about the switch step is about distance, really. So the same as you do like a little switch step for the kick with him, he wants a little switch step for the knee. So you do the same thing whether it's a kick or a knee, which is really helpful because the difference between a kick and a knee is distance, which is what we're talking about in how pad work is used for fighters. He's like, are you too tired? Is it okay? So he's very sweet. He's very concerned about me training in the morning of my fight. So he's saying kwa wang. Wang means to fill the space that your opponent just took by backing up. So wang means to like, if you're teeping, you step down off of the teep to keep closing distance. That's what he was doing. He had me firing two power shots. Those are not his open side, but I want to close that distance, like what I'm saying right here, as I'm coming towards him. With my knee, I was coming down wang, which is to take that step, and then I was like stuffing myself. So he's showing here how to not do that. So see how he does the switch step, but he doesn't over follow with his back foot on the switch. He's saying this is too close. If you just walk forward, the way he was saying he doesn't like to walk forward on kicks either because it's visible. If you just walk forward with the knee, you have less flexibility with the distance that you've already chosen. When you do a little switch step, you have a little bit more flexibility in how long or short that knee is going to be, so you're not snuffing yourself. That doesn't mean you can't do step knees, but this is for the flexibility of range. And he's making a point about when you do the switch step and you can kind of follow if the opponent tries to slip off to the side. If they're trying to slip off to the side, they have like an elbow or something, so when you're doing your knee, he's showing here, he wants you to, I call it hitching a trailer. He wants you to put your hand on top of the head and kind of like pull the head down into the knee. But the important part about grabbing the top of the head like that is that you're ultimately controlling your opponent and keeping them right in your space. So it's less about like necessarily pulling them into the knee and more about like holding them in place. I'm asking him about whether he angles his knees to the side or whether he likes to come straight. He's like, focus on everything. Like you have different angled knees for a reason. Like use all the different angled knees. The fact that there are differences mean that there's different contexts for things rather than that one is right and one is wrong. So see there how I'm not snuffing myself anymore. It's controlling the knee as I'm coming back down, and I'm not wang, I'm not stepping forward with it, but I am holding the ground that I'm in. If he goes backwards a little bit, now I can do that step forward coming off of the knee and I'm not snuffing myself. Here he's teaching the difference between hitching the trailer on top of the head, which is what he prefers, versus hitching the trailer on the shoulder, which doesn't give you as much control over the opponent.
And like you grab the head down and then it's like you like
So he's saying you hitch the trailer and then you pull the head down at the same time that your knee is ascending. So you're kind of like alligator mouthing it, your hand and your knee.
Take your knee, but if you do like this,
So he's saying if you end up grabbing behind the shoulder, it's very slippery. And see how he's like snuffing himself and coming too far to the outside? He's saying you don't have control. He's like, it's not wrong to do it that way, but for him, it doesn't feel good.
You have to find the feeling that
you have to find the feeling that for you is like, that's the way I want to do knees. That's the distance I want to be at. So we're saying to each other, it's not incorrect to do it the way that he was just showing. It's just for some purposes, his way is better for those purposes. He said there are some people who, when they grab the shoulder, maybe they can do it really well, but for him, he had to control from the top of the head. He's making a point here that was interesting. He's saying that as a pad man, you have to communicate with your fighter, and as a fighter, you have to communicate with your pad man. The point he's making is that you should really believe in your kick or your knee or your strikes. It should feel good, like I am really hitting that when you hit the pad. There are ways that it can feel bad even if you're doing exactly what you should be doing, which is if the pad holder is holding it too high, too low. So by communicating with them where you're like, keep it a little bit lower or lift that a little bit higher so that when I nail my leg in there, it builds your confidence as a fighter in that kick, in that strike. And that's all about the feeling on the pad, giving you the confidence that you'll have anytime you use it. So I was throwing two knees and he's like, just throw the one, because I was coming down a little bit off balance from the two. He just said Roop Muay. If you follow Kevin and my Muay Thai Bones podcast, we talk about Roop a lot. Roop is like your overall composure or silhouette as a fighter. And so he's telling me to basically stay beautiful in your form when you're throwing these things. Like pay attention to your posture and your balance. So look at how he's having me have balance between the left side and the right side. And you kind of set things up left and then come with the right. He's doing that with his pads. He's asking me if it was okay with the pad work because, again, he's worried about making me too tired.
Your confidence by the feeling on the pads.
So Crew F is going behind the ring and he's talking to Karahat, who's over here, like to the right of the ring. We showed up with Karahat and Crew F was just so excited to see him, and he kept like being an incredible host because he was so excited to have Karhat in his gym. He was like making sure that he had an iced tea and telling him that he should come and eat this recipe for krapao that that Crew F and his wife are like known for. It was sweet to see him so excited to have Karhat in his gym. So Crew F went and talked to one of his students. She's sitting over here watching our session, and he was saying that she's a follower of me. And I was telling him that anytime I go to Hua Hin, which I sometimes do for a fight or something, everyone was like, are you going to Sitjaopho? Like, I know you guys have really been waiting for this session. And I'm glad we're able to finally put it in here. Crew F is really awesome. I see why people adore him so much. So Kevin's making a little bit of fun of this like concern over me getting too tired or something. And so on this round in the pads, I actually came a little bit harder. Like I was trying to prove to Crew F that he didn't need to worry about me being too tired that night, which I don't think I did because now he's like more worried that I'll be tired. But I proved to him at the fight it was okay. So see how he's holding for this like range of close strikes. And I'm being aggressive, so I'm like walking him off the court, something that I do. He handled it well. Like he actually, they're like these little signals, and I feel like he picked it up and was like, okay, and he kind of like made it a little bit more playful, even though it was kind of hard. He's starting to kick me back now, which he had not done at all before. When I stay at this range, I actually understand that like switch knee and grabbing of the head much better. When I come from too far away, I have a harder time with that switch step. So if you're having a hard time with that switch step, it might be that you're already too far away, and the time you engage it is when you're kind of within your jab range. So see how that knee made him fall backwards, and then so it's followed by the long right. This is the way that he's shaping a fighter's understanding of distance, is where he stands on pads. I'm asking about his block. His block is very high, but you don't want to pull your hand down to meet the knee. You want your knee to come up to meet your elbow. His block is totally tucked up into like his shoulder. So he's telling me to step on my first strike. It's almost like Sifu, who's in the Muay Thai Library. He has like a jumping hook, like a jumping lead hook. It's like that, but it's for like an uppercut. And basically, because the way that you're jumping in on that uppercut, you don't really have a tell for what's coming. It seems like something very straight is going to be coming, so people might anticipate like a teep or a knee. And then you're just coming right up the center and then following with that long right, which is the same as that knee to right kick. I was expressing to him that I was a little bit frustrated because I'm trying to do his style, so I'm trying to do this switch knee, and I kept missing it and stepping forward because that's my habit. But like I was just saying to you guys, the reason I went to my other habit is because the distance I was standing at. So to solve that, I actually just need to be maybe like 5 inches closer. If you guys can hear the sound he's making, he's starting to do this. This is like a war drum when you're like holding pads or clinching or coming at someone with knees. It's this kind of, I think Joe Hong Tong is the one who said it. He called it hungry boy. And it's when you're like coming forward relentlessly and you won't stop. That's that sound that he's making. He's actually trying to like goad me forward to be more aggressive on the pads. So see, he switched that up. So I did the left knee and he went backwards, but he didn't go backwards as far as for the kick. So the elbow is what followed off of that. He's like, he'll have no power tonight. So he's asking me how old I am, and he's actually only slightly older than me. I'm like 4 years younger than him. So very, very close in age. I can't believe he was from this time that's like post-Golden Age, because he clearly was so influenced by Karahat and the Femeu of the Golden Era. He's very clean in his technique, which is not common now, but I think was already starting to be less common when he was an active fighter. So he must have stood out quite a bit at the time that he was with his brother Phettho. He's Phettho. They were at a time when that like sheen and cleanliness of technique was like starting to fade out. So they're a little bit of a vestigial tale or something. So we're talking about Karahat, who's over in the corner, and saying he's my idol. And Crew F is like, me too. He loves him. It's very sweet when we go around with Karahat when he comes with us for filming these sessions. He's just got this, like, everyone knows who he is. So he's actually done a little bit of a progression. I kind of changed the pace in the second round because I started coming at him a little bit harder, and he totally absorbed that and like went with it. And now he's actually kind of moving for a little bit more power. So as everything progresses, the power is going up. He put himself in the ropes for me, so I'm keeping him in the ropes. And he's totally like feeling what that is and going with it. He's very good as like a improv pad holder. He's not calling for anything anymore. If you see, like, after I teep him, he just angles his body so that I have to see and feel the opening. The way that he has such a wide stance is because he's holding pads, but the way that he switches his stance and moves with such balance all the time, that's something that comes absolutely from being a fighter. You can always see this with pad holders in the way that they move their feet, because they're kind of like pulling from their experience as fighters when they're holding pads like this. So now he's basically holding for knees and elbows. This would be like a later round in a fight for a Muay Thai fighter. We start a little bit slower, but rounds 3 and 4, it would be this kind of relentless charging forward, you know, with Jangwat and cleanly strikes and things like this, not like mowing forward. But that's what he's doing with his like slight drawback all the time, is like drawing, this is the distance from knee, elbow. And now he's letting me juggle him at this slightly longer range. So I have to work my way in. This is kind of in line with what he was saying about communicating with your pad man. He had held for something after my knee that I was like, for me, my Jangwat, when I throw this knee, I feel more like I want to throw the elbow on the other side, or if I throw that elbow here, I want the opposite knee to be coming up, which isn't what he was holding for, but by me telling him, this is what my nature wants me to do, he started holding for it, and so you can just kind of build the confidence on that.
I do some technique, and then I feel that this is not smooth, so feel like a strange, so it's not feel right, you know. Yes.
So what we're just talking about here is tamachat. Tamachat is like nature, or something that comes very naturally. And so he was talking about how some people might do it this way and that way, and he's saying it depends on what feels natural to you. He's like, sometimes if I do a technique that someone else showed me, it feels unnatural, or it's like off balance a little bit, or it's just not beautiful. And so he makes these slight adjustments to it to solve all of those things that don't feel good for him, and then it becomes natural to his movement. So these slight adjustments, rather than like it has to be exactly like that person said, is something that you can kind of start to mess with when you get more aware of your own style and your comfort. I like the sound he makes for knees. He does it when he's describing knees as well. He's like, doon, doon. He's worried about something hurting from pad work. Nothing hurts in pad work when you've been training a lot, because you're very like calloused.
Get your breath going there, baby.
So Crew F was calling over to Karahat. He was like, do I need to worry about how much power she's putting out, or clinching or sparring or any of these things? And Karahat's like, don't worry about it, she's Muay Cow.
Because once we have a style, then you can read back into the pad work.
So again, like he's kind of a
เอาอะไรเรียมข้าว
he's very technical and he has very beautiful technique, but he doesn't think about it conceptually. He's not like this is the way to do something. He kind of has to feel it, and everything that he chooses, he has a reason for that he can express, like why he's chosen that thing over something else. But if you're like conceptually, what is your style? He's like, I don't know. Like you have to kind of feel it and do it, and then everything kind of comes to him. So if he did it naturally and then you're like, what was that you just did? He can explain it to you really, really well. If you're like, what is the correct way to do this? He's like, I have to feel it first. He's a very interesting teacher in that way. He allows people to kind of have their own space, and he'll just fix small things rather than change things. He's asking if I want to wear gloves because he has this no glove sparring he does with his students.
ก็เขาบอกว่าเขาเป็นแชมป์
So this is just chatting with Crew F between things, but it shows his kind of personality. He's very, I would call it giddy, but it's very sweet. Like he has a lot of quiet energy that's kind of excitable.
แบกเยอะเลยอ่ะ
พี่กัด48
He's hearing about my weigh-in from the morning and that there's a 6-kilo difference between me and my opponent, and he just cannot believe this is happening. But he just goes with it. He's like, all right. We were starting to spar, and then he's like, oh no, I have to put my hair up. So he had to go inside and ask his wife where the hair bands were so that he could come out and spar.
These go with my shorts.
Oh, they do.
You can see how nice this gym is. There's actually more students coming to watch us now, like as everything progresses. But it goes quite deep back there. There's a nice mirror in the back.
Train you.
With the people that come here.
When Kevin and I were watching this before this recording, these leaves behind me here were blowing in the first section where I'm shadowboxing with Crew F, and it reminded me of like a Dead or Alive background where it's like snowing or something. It just had this beautiful kind of like background element to it. All right, so this is getting into sparring. You can always learn so much from female fighters through sparring. They're good at pad work and things like this, but they really excel in how they show you things in sparring. You can see immediately from Crew F's style that he is a Jangwat Song, which means that he's a counter fighter. He does not initiate much. He might fake to get you to go first, but he really likes to spoil whatever strike his opponent is bringing at him and then counter. Look at his overall root. You can see in the posture of his legs how they kind of create this little like ladder leg, and then he kind of angles back, and then from his shoulders up he's got that tilted, the chin down thing that creates that, what Kevin was calling the cobra hood. By looking at his overall root, you can actually see how well he shifts his weight between his front and back leg. He's usually on his back leg, but he can switch to his front without me being able to see it because of his feet. So see how he knows what's coming because he can see where my weight's going. This is something I learned from Karahat. If you watch him in the Muay Thai Library, this kind of like weight transfer of how to read someone is something that's very much what Karahat does in his magician stuff. See how he turned, he was gonna teep me, and as I closed the distance too fast, he just turned it into a leg bar. He just tipped he did it again, he just tipped his knee to the side. So basically, just by lifting the leg, it can turn into like 4 things at a hair's notice. See how he's starting to interrupt my guard there too? He's letting me go first for a number of reasons. That is his style. He probably would initiate things a little bit more if he actually had to like back me up or something. He's being gentle with me. He's being a little bit slow motion with me. But look at how he turned that leg bar into a kind of like leg hook. He'll do it again when he knows that I'm going to be punching back at him because he does something to make me punch, and then he'll scoop. He said he was being Karahat there. He's like, oh, Sian. Look at how he switches there just to be like evasive and annoying. he moves so much and like right at the right moment. He's very frustrating to stand in front of. You end up using more energy than you need to just because you're a little bit like, I need to get more tense in order to catch him, which is not actually how you catch femur at all. He has a very soft also, it's not quite eye contact, but he's definitely like watching in a very, you can tell he's watching you. So see how he's front leg there, like he's going to attack me, and then he just shifts his weight onto his back leg so that he can turn into defense at any moment. Sometimes he bounces off of my teeps, like, okay, that really worked, and then sometimes he stands in on them, which you would totally do in an actual fight situation as well, to like get your opponent to believe that what they're doing works, and then you just change up. Look how relaxed and beautiful his blocks are. And when he takes a step back, it's so measured and even, he's able to fire on either side as he's moving. He's never like out of stance. He's very ambidextrous, even though he stays in his orthodox stance almost all the time. So I'm doing all these little things as I'm closing in on him because that's my style. But when he just takes a little step back and then launches that big open side kick, like, he just negated every single tap, tap, tap point I got in that time.
What are you taking from him?
Huh?
So Kevin asked me, what are you taking from sparring with Crew F? And I'm like, I said in Thai to Crew F, I'm like, "He what song?" I'm like, he's clearly a counter fighter, is what I'm feeling. And when you're fighting a counter fighter, you kind of like aren't quite sure when the answer is coming, so you start to kind of doubt your own initiations as well.
Ask him. Yeah, but he switches?
ใช่ผมชอบเตะซ้ายครับ
What is his style?
So he likes to kick left all the time because that's the open side if you're fighting orthodox fighters.
รอจังหวะรอโต้บังแล้วโต้แหละ
So he's describing his style. He's saying he likes to wait, spoil, and counter.
Like tack.
Crew Tech in the Muay Thai Library is also exactly like this.
Stop the timing
Interrupt.
ทำลาย
Interrupt.
destroy break down opponent timing
He said it's important to break down your opponent's timing.
when they come ก็
That's what he means by like teeping the leg, or if they're coming forward with a punch and you just kind of pull their leg out. By interrupting them, you're interrupting their timing and getting them off of their rhythm, and then you can kind of take over the beat, and it makes them less able to have the speed and skill that they have normally because they're off their rhythm and things just don't quite come together. So he's blocking, spoiling, and interrupting is his number one weapon, and then he has a counter because in the time that he's doing that, the opponent is
Tell him
firing.
how many fight you have.
269 ครั้งแล้ว
So he kept being like, is this okay? Like, are you hurting your shins with the sparring? And so Kevin was like, tell him how many fights you have so that he stops worrying. Again, he was doing this in pad work. He was like bouncing his front leg to get his student to kind of mirror and bounce the front leg. He's doing it again, and I'm starting to bounce my front leg because in being forced to describe what kind of fighter he is, I'm like, duh, if he never likes to go first, I have to try to wait him out. So I've changed my style too. The bouncing leg is more of the waiting to interrupt. It's a little bit easier, actually, to not be like charging forward because I know that he's waiting to be countering everything. Look at how he comes off of that big left kick, though. I often lose, I'm like taking these steps back. So he does this big left kick, right? I get hit by it, and then I come towards him to punch him as like the, okay, I got hit, but now I'm going to punch you. And he does this little scoop of the leg. And I'm like, what are you doing there? And he's like, I don't know, I can't remember. What did I do? So I'm like describing to him what he did. This is what I'm talking about. He doesn't have this like wrote down in a book concept of fighting, but he feels it. And when he feels it, he can be like, this is what I'm doing. That's the ice cream truck, and he's yelling at his son to come out because he's like, the ice cream truck's here. Oh, he stepped back to get away from my leg kick and then used that same leg to fire back his big left side that he likes. Look at how wide his feet are. Oh, Femeu, like, this is so frustrating. See how he's closing himself up and then he'll just move his arms down to parry my teep, but he hasn't opened at all. Now he's just blocking me. See how he's not tense? Like, he's all closed, but there's no excess tension. He did it again. He's totally unaware that he did it. So I'm telling him, I'm like, this is what you just did that I was describing before. He's blocking low or high, but he can actually do two of them at once because he's anticipating where my next kick is going to be. I was like, how do you know whether it's going to be high or low? And he's just like, I can feel it. He senses a disturbance in the force or something. So when you're playing with somebody and you get a single point, you just have to blow it up. You just have to act like it's the biggest point you ever had. And it's actually pulling the like playful fighter out in him a little bit better to start doing the like, this is how you spar playful, calling your points and things like this. He's less worried about hurting me accidentally. I don't know what his thing is. Look at how he's basically just creating this like whirlpool of his arms when he's on one leg like that. Oh, he's much better at waiting than I am. Look at the way he just moved back with his feet, switching stance like that is very much like Karahat. Karahat wouldn't do hopping, but it's the same like measured. The way he just took 2 steps back there and then went into southpaw so that his left kick would be twice as powerful. So we're going to do another round of sparring.
He's so fast.
It's very difficult, people who are so quick like that, because they're already moving before your brain has told you that your thing is like working. So you get spoiled fast. So Crew F had just been saying that nowadays people throw way more elbows than back when he was a fighter. And I'm like, I'm making a point that back in his day when it was like traditional 5-round fights, there was no reason to throw that many elbows. Like you had to kind of time them. On today's entertainment fights that are 3 rounds and you just have to like go forward the whole time, you can just kind of like machete elbows or like kind of a lawnmower of elbows, and it's more dangerous because it's the like clashing is there. He thought that was pretty funny. That like the danger of a elbow you don't see versus the danger of like 20 elbows that one of them probably will land is quite different. He's talking about how back in his day, which is like the 2000s, back in his day, he said punches were much harder. He's like, people who were punchers, even like average fighters who weren't Muay Mat, but he's like, people punched much harder back in my day. There used to be much more of a Western boxing influence on Muay Thai, like back in the Golden Age. Even people who were not Muay Mat in any way had very good boxing skills. There's less of that now. But scoring is different too, so. Again, if you look at his legs and like how subtle his weight transfers are, and then you look at my legs and how obvious my weight transfers are, you can see how he's catching me every single time I make a move to come towards him. He can see it from like a mile away, because look at how I'm stomping around with my feet versus look at what he's doing with his legs. It's like night and day. So he's referencing what he was saying before about how powerful punchers were back in the day. He was like, it's dangerous to let someone keep coming with their punches. I'm referencing Nam Kaboon because I plowed him across the canvas. It's one of the rules I have about yelling the name of the person whose move you're stealing. I was going to shove him back on a knee, and instead he just elongated himself and basically put his shin into my like diaphragm. See how he turned that block into a kick? He did kind of like a question mark kick because it started as a block. he and Karaha, it's the same thing, that like they can turn one move into another move that's not less effective. Like it's usually if you're doing like a 2-kick or 2-punch combination, you kind of snuff one to get power on the other, whether it's their first or second. He has power in both things he's doing, and he changed his mind like mid-movement. Look at that, he's so fast. When femur fighters do this, when they decide to just stay in on something that you've thrown at them, it's this magic trick of, if you're Muay Thai like me and kind of like a power, using power fighter, if you can then do a slick move, like something that Crew F is teaching me here, they're like, oh, not just a rock, like there's also this kind of like fluidity and skill. With a femur fighter like Crew F, he's so fluid and beautiful and evasive that when he shows a little moment of power, like standing in on you or throwing you to the ground, is again, it's this magic trick of the opposite, kind of making everything much more amazing. He's just doing tap, 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 but it's actually equally annoying to all the movements that interrupt you otherwise. Like how hard it is just depends on how encouraged you are to go in after it. Look at how he just barely melts off of things. And even his blocks, he's kind of like inviting you to throw something as he's blocking, so you've actually fired your shot when you have very little chance of landing anything on him. It's like subliminal. So he blocked me and he was slightly under my leg, so he just held his leg up in the air to like continue off balancing me. He like made a shelf. Oh, he wasn't fully aware that I was like, that's it, that's done. So we're gonna do a little bit of clinching.
10 minutes.
That was very fun though.
10 minutes of clinching.
You can hear, maybe, I don't know how down the sound is, but you can hear him giggling all the time. He has this kind of infectious, frequent giggle that he has. Very joyful energy altogether.
Everybody has a philosophy, right?
So sometimes it can be a little bit difficult to pull a trainer's style out other than what we were just doing. Like if you get a trainer actually just moving and doing what it is that they do, you can learn so much from it. It becomes instructive when you ask questions. Otherwise, they're just kind of kicking your ass and maybe you can like remember some of it. But because he's not like, I have this system and this is phase 1, 2, 3, 4, you have to get him moving. So getting into sparring and getting into clinch, which we're going to be doing. Kevin's going to walk around the gym to kind of show more of what that looks like. Again, 5-star gym, 5-dog gym, very good. I love old weathered rings like this that have just probably been there forever. It's a nice light, it's very green, it has kind of like a fresh feeling to it all around. Lots of open space because I think there's a lot of emphasis on shadow and sparring there. Very nice. All right, so the thing with femur fighters is that their clinch is often, not always, but very often anti-clinching and spoiling. Crew F is amazing at it. He's keeping his arms on the inside all the time, which is good whether you're offense or defense. But like I was saying before, to watch his roop, to watch his like overall composure so that you can see where his weight is and how he balances. The reason his Muay is so distinct and like articulated so that you can see it from the back row, which is really beautiful, is if you look at this, if you look at the posture he's taking, it doesn't change very much. So the fact that he can hold his posture more or less still and just kind of frustrate me means that he looks like he's just kind of barely moving. And I'm like doing all of this swimming around. Look at my body, how I'm like trying to change angles to get inside or something. The contrast of how much I'm moving to like how narrow he is and like still, I look like I'm overworking. He was blocking my knees with his elbows, which I've never seen. So as we're clinching, if I come to knee his ribs, he's just going to drop his elbow down. He actually doesn't connect his forearm to my body, so he's kind of floating off, but he hitches the back of the neck really well. If you look at what he's doing with his hands most of the time, he's just creating these little like tents, because that's how your hands are inside the gloves. If you have people who clinch with their hands, it's...
What's he doing with his hands?
I'm asking what he's doing with his hands because he's gripping me so good. He has the two tents and he's kind of like folding them over each other. You couldn't do that with gloves. He would probably kind of like sink it down a little bit. There, the way he's twisting his wrists, he's like, when you're wearing gloves, you twist your wrists like this, but when you're clinching with me, you can kind of stack your hands.
เพราะว่าผมไม่ได้ใช้แรงเยอะ because I not use much power because like when you grab here because now I get only good position already you know so if I use the power I can do too but just now I just use here.
So he's saying he's not using power all the time. So like from here, because he's not using a lot of power, he doesn't have to have a super grip because he's basically like holding until he does a power move. If he needed to lock me and hold me in place, he would totally slip down into his wrist so that he could get a stronger grip on there. But he's talking about conserving energy in the clinch, which anti-clinchers are amazing at. Look at how straight he's saying. Like even when I try to turn him, it's like he's barely moving his feet because he can keep his posture so still. And then comparison, look how much I'm moving. That matters. Like that really matters when you're like playing an aesthetic sport. So I'm actually throwing way more weapons than him, but they kind of get lost in all of the movement. They don't have the distinction and kind of timing on them. So he's like more or less still, and then he throws a knee, and it's like the most dynamic movement he's done, so it's super visual. So he waited for me to kind of like push forward to try to like bully him backwards, and he matador twisted me so that I fell down. So I'm staying a little bit farther away from him, and I was losing at his range, so I had to close in quickly. So it's in his interest to kind of keep all of us long, whereas I'm trying to like keep us very, very close. I had a really hard time building my frame with him, which is where you have one hand behind the neck and one kind of on the inside of the arm. I had a really hard time getting into that position because once you have his neck, he closes in. It's almost impossible to get an inside position if you didn't start with it.
เพราะว่าท่านจับท่านข้างนอกแล้ว
ครับก็ต้องระวังปุ๊บผมก็ไปแล้ว
So I'm asking him how he comes inside so well all the time. And he's basically like, you just keep coming inside. He has a very natural ability to kind of squirm his way in, which Karhat is also amazingly good at. He uses shoulders to kind of just like wiggle his way into things. So in the way that Crew F is like, you just do it. It's because for him is a very intuitive, natural movement.
ใช่แค่นี้ใช่ไหม
So I'm trying to get over his arm and kind of push my elbow down, and I don't know if it's his height or if it's the angle of his arm, but he makes that incredibly hard to do. So he got me fighting for a different position. I hadn't not a dominant position, but I had an okay position, and I fought for a better one, and he used that movement of me letting go of this rung to kind of come to the next rung to spin me. So this is what he's doing.
ไม่ต้องแทงก็ได้แค่เดินมาเดินมาดิเดินมา
So he's saying for me to walk. He's like, they don't even have to grab you yet. Like, as their momentum is coming towards you, you kind of like turn almost the top of your forearm into their ribs.
จะลองใช่ไหม
And then your leg on the same side as the arm that's flipping has to interrupt the opponent's leg. See how his right leg is going into my left leg there?
ถ้าทำเดียว
You have to, if someone's walking towards you, you have to kind of pivot your leg into the inside of their leg, and then you can do the
เดินมา
turn on it.
ข้างขวา
ใช้ขวาปัดผมเดินมาปุ๊บใช่ไหมขวาแล้วก็ปุ๊บใช่ไหม
Ah.
ใช่ไหมใช้ขวาไหม
ตัวย่างภูมิ
ต
he's trying to figure out if I'm doing what he's been doing because he's like, again, very natural for him.
He's twisting around
And he rolls his arm over too.
So his leg is actually interrupting my leg's ability to kind of like move and
He rolls
catch
his arm
myself.
over. No,
But he does it very like,
with his shoulder.
as like a pivot.
เก่งอย่างเงี้ยโทษ
See how he twists like on a dime, like he almost like pirouettes his legs.
Yeah.
Roll.
ไหนๆสายช่วย I want to see yeah roll ต้อง
Little
โล
bit.
ต้องโล
So he's saying you have to roll, you roll a little bit because it pitches the person forward more than just kind of like shoving them.
Because every technique I don't know I just
feeling.
yeah
He's like, I don't know every technique. Sometimes I have to do it to like figure out what it is that I'm doing because it's based on a feeling. He was standing so upright. I think he was doing that to show me how you have to roll. See how if your thumb is up, as you're coming across the body, you're turning your thumb down. That's the like rolling of the hand.
ใช้ขาช่วยด้วยเข้ามาใกล้
He's saying use your legs a little bit more. You have to let them come much closer. This isn't a from a distance term. This is like as you're making body contact with someone. It's very close.
ขา inside ปุ๊บแล้วก็บิดปุ๊บนั่นแหละนั่นแหละ
เข้าใจ
ใช่ป่ะ
โอ้ยปังโอ้ย
I threw the first elbow, so now elbows are on the table. He got an upward one that was really nice. See how he's starting to put more weight over me now? He wasn't doing that at the beginning. He was only putting his hips in. Now he has his hips in and he's kind of sinking his upper body weight onto me. It's much more tiring.
ทำไมก็ไม่ท
ไม่ค่อยทำสวีท
ำเตา
He's saying back in his day, people didn't sweep the leg on a knee so much. Meaning, when you're clinching, nowadays, anytime someone knees, their standing leg is basically up for grabs to kind of like try to knock them off balance with timing on it. He said it wasn't illegal when he was a fighter, but it just wasn't popular, like nobody did it. Now it's very, very popular. Everyone does it. But he says it changes what you're able to use as a trip and it changes what you're able to do with your knees now that that's in play, whereas it wasn't so much.
โอ้ย
See how he's kind of manipulating my posture by, he's not yanking my head down, so I don't have a sense of panic of like fighting it off, but he's weighing it down enough that it's breaking my posture in everything that I'm trying to do. And again, he's got that like cobra hood, like his overall posture is very ning, it's like very still.
อย่างเงี้ยได้
นี่
หลังดิข้างหลังได้ไหม
แบบนี้
So he's showing me how to do that same turn while someone is kneeing. So while he's on one leg, I need to spin him towards his standing leg.
ได้
He's trying to figure it out.
ทำแบบนี้ใช่
So the reason you want to go towards the standing leg rather than towards the leg that's in the air is that the leg that's in the air can, like a little kickstand, like put its leg out and catch them. If you go towards the standing leg, they have no secondary limb to catch themselves as they're falling. See how he's just kind of cupping behind my triceps, but his forearms are in my elbows. So because he has the pressure points there, I have to use so much energy and thought into trying to figure out how to come over those angles. I'm so distracted trying to solve one thing that he basically has simplified anything he has to do down to like just stopping me from doing it. Oh, see how I pulled my weight away from him while I was trying to do that turn? You have to dig your weight towards, like you want to close that space a lot. Now he's starting to like get mean. Like this is more real in what he would be doing for knees. He's building them up. He's off balancing me, then throwing a couple of knees, off balancing me again. So I can't counter him. He's got elbows and knees working together. This is the like, and we're done. Now he's turning on me. He's turning into the Muay Thai fighter, like pantomiming one.
จับแบบนี้แล้วก็ข้างในไม่ได้
So I'm asking if someone has, this is what I call a frame. See how he has one hand behind my head and one on the elbow? I'm like, if someone has built their frame, how do you get out of it? And he's like, off balance them, like roll them. And then he changed his mind. He's like, no, 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 I have a better one. So whereas he had initially gone like this, now he's folding his arms in and making distance so that he can knee under our like arm basket. And then once my knees are coming back, that's when he does his turn.
just over I think better.
He's saying this over is better than the kind of struggling under because at least you're folding in and tying up their elbows. You don't want to stay in this position for a really long time, but as a like, this is a bad one, this is a better one, you can use it to start throwing those knees, have him knee back, and then use that timing to do a dramatic change. So I'm able to actually throw knees from this position, but because he's got my head cranked down so hard, there's no power on them. They don't look very good. So by controlling my posture, he's taking away even my ability to score very well.
เพราะว่ามันไม่มีกำลังมัน don't have like a power to because appointing control you everything and you have this
So he's saying getting into this position where someone's yanking your head down is terrible because once they've broken your posture like that, you don't have power to fight them off. So he's saying once they start yanking on your head, because you're not going to have power, it's like someone has ripped the oxygen out of your mouth. Your time is now super limited. You want to, as you're being pulled down, try to off-balance them. Because people don't pull down and do nothing. They pull down and they try to knee. So chances of them going onto one leg are high at that moment. And it's one of those trying to get out of that situation as soon as possible. I was trying to do the chicken man trip there. He's in the Muay Thai Library teaching his impossible trip. I was trying to do it there. But again, on all twists and turns in the clinch, you want to be like very close. I can't get a grip on his back and I can't control his neck.
เพราะว่าผมตัวใหญ่ไงแต่ถ้าตัวเท่า
He was like, it's okay, I'm much bigger. I know.
ต้องมี position เก่งใช่ไหม
อย่างเงี้ย
แบบนี้ก็ออก
อย่างเงี้ยถ้าว่าจับผมนะถ้า if you keep with me if you catch me แล้ว if I'm not preparing so I just like this ไม่ได้ so I should know แล้ว
He's saying if I come and grab him and get a really good position and he hasn't prepared himself, like he hasn't caught me as I'm coming in, he has very few options for how to get out of that position. So if I lock him and it's breaking his posture, it's better to stop me from getting into that position in the first place. He said you have to feel whether you're in a good position or a bad position. If you get caught off guard and you're in a bad position, you have to know feeling-wise, how do I get out of this position? He said the way that you know, the way that you get the like, I've been here before and I know how to solve that is in training, changing position and understanding what things feel like. He said you have to learn feeling and timing in training. Absolutely true.